Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. My name is Perryn Keys. I'm the executive sports editor, joined today by Scott Rabalais, our venerable longtime columnist, and a season debut for Reed Darcey. He will be taking care of us during LSU women's basketball season, but in the meantime, you have read his work on recruiting, on high schools, and, of course, LSU football. He is filling in, so to speak, for Wilson Alexander, who is taking a much-deserved, well-deserved morning off. We got him hitched. Wilson got married to his lovely young bride, Elise Alexander. Now they got married in New Orleans on Saturday. We wish him the highest order of congratulations. And so he will be back later today as we tape this on Monday morning. He will not miss a moment of LSU Alabama week. And it is LSU Alabama week. Today's episode is brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. Learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies at championwealthstrategies.com. That's championwealthstrategies.com. Alabama week is here. LSU will tango with the Crimson Tide at 6:45 p.m. Saturday in Bryant-Denny Stadium. LSU is a 3.5-point underdog. LSU opened as a 7-point underdog. It's been bet down to 3.5. The over-under is 60. And, of course, this is the big one. Plenty on the line, and we will get into it all. Gentlemen, welcome in.
Thanks, Perry. It is a big week, and it's nice to have young Reed with us. He's a talented young writer, and he's been doing a great job for us at The Advocate. We're making him do all kinds of things, so he's learning fast. Too.
Appreciate that, Rob. It's great to be here. Next man up. As they say, it's next man
exactly
up.
it. So a bit of business here first. If you're tuning in, you obviously know that The Advocate has always been the number one destination for LSU football coverage. This podcast is just another way for us to bring our great coverage to you. You can subscribe to The Advocate the old-fashioned way with our print edition, also with our digital editions. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. Subscribe also to or sign up for our LSU newsletter. It's a daily newsletter, but Rab handles that 3 times a week. Excuse me. To do that, to sign up, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. And by all means, get a hold of our podcast. We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And we'll be on our Advocate and NOLA.com social channels every Monday and Thursday. We will be live, but obviously you can catch us later on anytime you need to on our YouTube channels and all our social channels. Every Monday and Thursday here. Okay, so gentlemen, LSU opens as LSU opened as a 7-point underdog. They are now a 3.5-point underdog. And this really is the big kahuna. It's the big kahuna every year. LSU obviously stumbled out of the gate, did not look good against Florida State, stumbled again at Ole Miss, did not look good, especially on defense against Ole Miss. But they have righted the ship. They've done everything that they were supposed to do up until now. And they, the previous 2 weeks, they take care of Auburn pretty handily. They take care, obviously, of Army handily. But during that game, there was what we believe to be probably a very, very significant injury. Zy Alexander, LSU's number 1 corner, he goes down with an injury right there at the end of the first half, returning an interception. We're taping this on Monday morning, so we may get an update on Zy later today from Brian Kelly at his press conference. But we're operating under the assumption, and we're going to operate on the assumption that Zy Alexander will miss this game. It's a big, big loss because, as we all know, LSU has struggled on pass defense more than any other area. And so, Rab, I'll put this to you first. Let's again, we're going to assume that Zy Alexander will not play this game. LSU's already down in numbers in the secondary. What do?
Well, they're going to have to rely on some more inexperienced guys, and of course they've moved Sage Ryan from safety, which is his traditional position, to playing one of the cornerback spots, and then you've got Ashton Stamps, you've got Andre Sam, right? You've got some other guy, LaTerrence Welch. I mean, there's still some players there, but they're either really inexperienced or they're not someone who they figured would be in a starting role to begin with to start the season. So it was a problem position going into the season, and it's become even more of a problem. You had 4 guys who were transfers in here, and none of them you figure are going to play. Alexander is obviously injured. J.K. Johnson has been injured since August. Maybe could play in a bowl game, but you can't count on him until then. And then you have 2 guys, Deuce Chestnut and Denver Harris, who are in limbo. I don't know what would be the best way to describe their status, Reed. I mean, they're with the team, but they're not practicing, and they're on scholarship, but they're not going to play. It's just wouldn't count on them to miraculously be picked to say, okay, you can play against Alabama. So it's a big problem for LSU, because this is one area that Alabama excels in is hitting the big pass. They are not a consistent offense, but you would expect that they're going to hit some big plays on LSU. So it's a huge concern for the Tigers, and not one that has an easy solution.
Yeah, and like you said, I think we're going to find out a little bit more about Denver Harris and Deuce Chestnut today. Like, we'll obviously ask Brian Kelly about their status heading into the Alabama game. We don't know if they're going to play. They might not. But even if they do, we haven't seen either of them in a very long time. So it'd be difficult. It'd be a lot to ask for them to throw them into that environment against Alabama and just expect them to play well and not skip a beat. So I think even if they do play, you're asking a lot from them, and so I think it might be wise to put them in just to have more numbers in the secondary. But again, it's going to be a concern just like it has all year.
So as we sit here today on Monday morning, whom do you expect, Reed, will be your 2 starting corners, and then obviously the 2 safeties?
I think, obviously we know this 2 safeties. It's going to be Major Burns and Andre Sam.
Yep.
Andre Sam played his best game of the year against Army. He's been a lot better since the Ole Miss game. They're going to need him to keep improving as a tackler, maybe make a couple plays. He had a pass breakup and 2 interceptions against Army. So I think if he can keep playing well, I think that's good back there. And obviously at the 2 corner spots, we're expecting Sage Ryan to be at one of them. He moved out there. He's more of a natural nickel and a natural safety, but he's been real solid ever since they moved him to the outside. Then I think at the other spot, minus Zy, Ashton Stamps, maybe. He's the only one who's gotten a start out of the remaining group, all those freshmen. But LaTerrence Welsh, maybe. He's gotten more snaps than Stamps overall. So I think it's going to be either Stamps or Welch. It just depends which one Brian Kelly might have trust more, I guess.
Could depend on a week of practice. It could be that final line for LSU.
Sure. LSU has had 2 weeks to try to figure this out, obviously. I'm sure they've got a plan. We just don't know exactly what that plan will be. Good to see Ashton Stamps is supposed to be back in time for this game. He's missed the last couple of games with an injury. LSU has allowed 238.5 yards passing. That's 10th in the SEC. They've gotten better over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah,
well, it is
trending.
Better. But
when you're last and you move up.
But it comes with a huge asterisk, though, because LSU was playing Auburn, which is very much an offense in transition this year and has not been very impressive through the year. And then, of course, Army is, in addition to being very much in transition as an offense this year, not obviously known for a downfield passing attack. So this is going to be, Rab, but let's put the defensive coordinator's hat on the top of your head for just a moment. If you're Matt House, what do you do to sort of help these guys in the secondary? What do you do? Do you blitz more often? That's going to, that's a risk reward, obviously. Do you cross your fingers and hope that the front 4 and the front 7 do what they're supposed to do, and that sort of helps LSU on the back end? What do you do?
This seems a little counterintuitive considering what we've talked about it with Harold Perkins all season long and stuff like that. But I think you need more help, and he's been playing kind of more of a nickel linebacker, somewhat of a hybrid position. I think I'm trying to contain and get there with my front 4 and maybe one of the linebacker, and I'm probably asking Perkins to help, in the secondary and with some of this coverage situation. So I think, it's tempting. My first inclination is to say blitz, but again, if you don't get home, then you're maybe left with a lot of one-on-one situations, and they could hit a big play, which again they're very adept at. I think LSU leads the nation with 13 plays over 40 yards, and Alabama's got like 11. So they're right there. So I think my inclination would be to try to bolster that with someone, and Perkins has gotten better at that. So I think that would be my plan.
And I think it's important to note that you can get pressure against Alabama. They're one of the worst in the SEC in allowing sacks. I believe they allow
they're
around
last 35 sacks allowed, last in the SEC.
Around 4 sacks a game. So you can pressure them. You can get through that offensive line. There's some experience on the inexperience on the offensive line. And Jalen Milroe, solid quarterback, not the most experienced though, and so he likes to throw deep. It's one of the things he excels at. So that gives more time for the front seven to get pressure. So I think just like the blueprint for this LSU defense has always been about its ability to get pressure, particularly because going into the season, we knew there would be issues on the back end. We were just hoping that, the front seven could sort of mask those issues because it could generate so much pressure. First few weeks of the season, that didn't happen. So maybe against Alabama this week, it'll just depend how much Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, if he plays, Harold Perkins, if they can really disrupt Jalen Milroe in the pocket, then I think that's sort of like the blueprint in terms of slowing down the Alabama offense.
This to me is very much a game where you say, I don't know if they will actually say this, but to me, I think you could go to LSU's front four and or front seven and say, okay, this game has got to be on you guys. This is a lot for you guys. It's a lot to say. It's a lot to put on you guys, but this has got to be on you guys. Alabama has really not done very. You say, well, hey, this is kind of an old-fashioned Nick Saban team. Yes, but not really. Alabama's averaging 3.7 yards per rush attempt. That's not very good. That's 11th in the SEC. So it's not. You say, well, hey, they take shots downfield. They must be doing it the old-fashioned way, where they're just going to run the ball and control the line of scrimmage. They give them credit where credit's due. Obviously, they were down 20-7 to Tennessee. They took it to them in the second half, one going away, and they've gotten. I think it's fair to say they've gotten pretty much the most out of what they have, given the limitations they have in terms of talent. They don't have a first-round quarterback, don't have first-round receivers this year like they have the past several years. But again, the passing attack is sort of very much feast or famine. 9.6 yards per pass attempt. That's third in the SEC. But just as you said, rated last in sacks allowed. They've given up 35, and it's an average of, I think, just as you said, close to 4 sacks per game, which is a lot. LSU, we thought going into this season, and frankly, Brian Kelly and his staff all said that they thought they expected big things. They named names, from Savion Jones, who has not made, frankly, much of an impact to this point. Mason Smith was a little slow getting out of the gate, and maybe, sort of rounding back into, as they say, football shape. This to me strikes me as, okay, you really need you really need LSU's front seven to control the line of scrimmage, shut down the run as much as they can, but also, just as you said, get home, get to the quarterback and affect the quarterback. I think we have to assume that LSU is going to be giving up some big plays on the back end. The question is how many, and can you offset that with a decent pass rush, get off the field on third down?
And just a quick point on that. If you do get home, you have to bring down Jalen Milroe. You have to tackle him. He is probably the most elusive quarterback, I think, in the SEC, and we've seen the LSU defense struggle to tackle, and we've seen them struggle to, sort of corral a quarterback like KJ Jefferson against Arkansas, where he sort of, got out the pocket and was able to extend plays and get like sort of long runs because the LSU defense couldn't bring him down. Milroe's the same way. He's quick, he's strong, and he's super elusive. So we're going to find out exactly how much the LSU defense has improved in tackling, as a unit since the Ole Miss game.
And we're gonna have to see whether LSU really and truly has improved. Not only one, just as you say, on tackling, but also are they good with their run fits? Are they good? We saw even Grambling. Ole Miss. My goodness, Ole Miss went side to side, got LSU out of position, got them to over pursue. Missed some assignments, missed gaps, and they would gash them for a good amount of yardage. Rab, I will put the offensive coordinator's hat on you now. If you were Alabama, if you were Tommy Rees, the Alabama offensive coordinator, how would you attack LSU?
trying to get my running game going with Jason McClellan and Milroe. You know, he can like you said hurt you with his feet as well, and try to limit the number of possessions or limit the amount of time that LSU and Jayden Daniels and their offense has the ball. I would think for Alabama, a good blueprint would be the Ole Miss game, right? They won 24-10.
That's right. Yeah.
24-10. This Ole Miss team that went up and down the field against LSU only got 10 points against Alabama. So I think that'd be the kind of game Alabama wants. They do not want to get in a shootout with LSU. They do not want to get it where it's what was the score of the game in 2019?
46-41.
46-41. Alabama's not winning that game. If LSU gets in the 40s, I don't think they're going to get there. They're going to get their points. They're going to get some big plays, but they have too many possessions, too many empty possessions where they don't get anything. That's been their MO all year anyway. So I'm trying to make that running game click and then the short passing game. Although Milroe, I don't think excels at the short passes. 50 yards, great. 5 yards, not so much.
Not as much.
But you just want to. People say time of possession is an over exaggerated stat. It might not be in this game, especially if you're Alabama. For LSU, they don't care, too much. But Alabama wants to keep LSU's number of possessions down in this game because the chances of them scoring are very good.
At the risk of sounding contrarian, you remember obviously, Rab, you were there. You covered it from start to finish. The 2011 LSU football team. They obviously won that, game of the century up at Bryant-Denny Stadium 9-6. And I think, maybe this is revisionist history, but I think everybody just sort of assumed that we would see a very similar game in the rematch down in the Superdome. And what did Alabama do? Didn't they threw the ball on first down, something like 11 out of their first 13 first downs? It was something to that effect. The reason I bring that up is just to say, well, are we sure that Alabama doesn't want to? I'm thinking about this, and I think, well, Nick Saban obviously is, the smartest guy in the room. Are we sure that he won't sort of switch it up on them? And what I mean by that is, well, okay, you're expecting Alabama to try to establish the run and then go deep off a play action or something like that. Are we sure that Alabama isn't going to say, watch this, watch, we're not only going to throw on first down, but we're going to do as much as we can in terms of zone reads, misdirections, getting the LSU defense to have to pursue side to side and wear them out. Even if they don't win the time of possession, maybe they're wearing them out. What did Ole Miss ran something like 88 plays against LSU? Is there any thought to that? I mean, is that a crazy thought that Alabama might try to take it to them?
No, and we have seen Saban go against type, break those tendencies. But that was a very good Alabama team in 2011. This is a good team. I mean, it's you're talking about the Alabama standard of looking at things. They could go 11-1 this year, and you go, well, they're okay, and like, well, they're 11-1, but that's kind of Alabama. But I don't think they're that kind of team. I think it's a very plausible game plan that you're envisioning, but I also not sure Nick Saban quite trusts this team as much as he trusts his team in 2020 or 2011 or some of these other years when they won and or played for the national championship. They're not in that picture yet. They're not in a 14 playoff by a long stretch. Right. And so I don't know. I think I'd be a little more likely to want to win the game like they won against Ole Miss. That's what I'm thinking. But as you said, he surprised us before, with a game plan like you're describing, it wouldn't be a whole shock.
And Milroe, he's not Jalen Hurts, he's not Tua, he's not Mac Jones, but he's still really dangerous. If he gets on the run, if he gets outside the pocket, then he's really difficult to bring down in the open field. So maybe if you're Alabama, you try to get him on bootlegs, get him out the pocket, get him rolling outside the pockets to sort of negate that pass rush. And get the LSU defense moving side to side, because we haven't really seen the LSU defense tested when they're really been forced to sort of stay in their gaps and have that integrity there. We haven't seen that since the Ole Miss game. Zooming out, Missouri, they made some plays, but it was rough at times, especially in the first half against Missouri. And then the Auburn offense and the Army offense aren't really going to test you that much. So those games were really good in terms of get improving your fundamentals. And sort of improving your baseline competence. but now we're really going to find out exactly how much improvement they've actually made since the Ole Miss game.
We're going to get to Jayden Daniels and the Heisman race and things of that nature, but just to sort of stay on the same type of theme, how is LSU going to win this game? How would they plan on attacking? Let's just talk about the LSU offense in a broad view. Obviously, Jayden Daniels is at the center of that, so it's discussion about him is inescapable. But if you were LSU, what's your game plan on offense going into this game? What do you do, Rab, in terms of attacking the Alabama defense, specifically the Alabama defense? What do you do to start off, and what do you do? What's the sort of the number one or number two priorities going into this game in general? Besides move the ball and score and win.
Yeah, of course. Balance. It's a good enough Alabama defense. It's a good defense. Top 25 defense, not like the best defense in the country, but very good. And so balance. You can't let them make you be one dimensional with the run on the pass. Even a team as good as LSU on offense, you're throwing the ball for almost 340 yards a game, and you're rushing it for about over 200 yards a game. So you want to keep that balance going. With a steady diet of Logan Diggs and some of the other running backs, and of course Jayden Daniels running some plays and hopefully for his sake sliding on some plays at the end. But you're going to see him with some predetermined runs along with scrambling. So I think balance is the key, and of course taking your shots as well. I mean they're you're up against it defending this offense. I mean you got to bracket. Yeah, the LSU receivers are talking about. You got to bracket Malik Neighbors, but you can leave Brian Thomas one-on-one, and then you got to worry about Kyron Lacy, and you got to worry about Jayden taking off, and you got to worry about them throwing the ball out of the backfield to a Trey Bradford, as we've seen, or a Josh Williams, or something like that. So, a lot of headaches for Nick Saban and his Alabama defense. But I think from LSU's perspective, the key is to try to maintain that run-pass balance. If they could have 150 plus yards rushing. I honestly they have to get to 200, but say 100. Okay, let's say 175 yards rushing to go along with a passing attack that's somewhere, 250 to 300. LSU wins the game. In my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good point. And the LSU offense, particularly, I think Brian Kelly and some of the offensive players for the last few weeks, they've sort of boasted, I guess for lack of a better word, that they sort of have a counter for everything a defense can throw at them.
Yeah.
If you play soft, they'll run it up into the box with Logan Diggs. If you come down, then they can burn you over the top with Neighbors and Brian Thomas. I think Alabama is sort of suited in a way to challenge the LSU offense in a way we haven't really seen yet. They've got a corner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, really good corner, can lock down guys one-on-one and man coverage. I don't think he's going to be able to shadow Malik Neighbors just because LSU does such a good job of moving him around the field, putting him in the slot, bringing him in motion. So that's one of the counters that LSU has to sort of counteract Alabama's best defensive player. We talked with Malik Neighbors a couple weeks ago about just how LSU uses motion and how they use it to bend the defenses against them, and how if they come in motion, Jayden and Neighbors, they see the look, safeties are coming down, and then they have a counter in order to do that. So I think the offense is versatile enough that no matter what sort of challenges Alabama presents, they have counters to go to for that. So I think I'm not expecting 10 points like Ole Miss did. I think the offense is good enough where they have counters to what Alabama can do.
They don't. One thing about LSU's offense, it's fairly straightforward. They don't use a lot of trick plays. The toss, the shovel pass to Malik Neighbors, something like coming around the end or something like that, is about all they do. That's the kind of tricky to me. Maybe they've been saving up something. I'd like to see a reverse. I would like to see a reverse or something. In this game, I think a pass, a halfback option or a wide receiver throwing the ball could in a very judicious spot could be interesting. I don't know. I'd like to see them do something that is a little out of the box. That maybe they've been saving up for Alabama.
This is one thing Wilson did a good job of in the mailbag last week. He brought up how Ole Miss likes to run that same sort of triple option play that LSU likes to run, where the receivers come in motion and they got the read option look in the backfield. It's a play that Malik Neighbors scored on against Auburn just a few weeks ago, and it's a play, if you remember, that's how Mason Taylor scored the 2-point conversion in the Alabama game last year. And so Wilson pointed out in the notebook, he went back and watched the Ole Miss game. Ole Miss tried that same play a few times, but every time Alabama was ready for it, they sort of had a look to sort of prevent them finding any sort of success with that play. So, I bet you Nick Saban, he remembers that 2-point conversion to Mason Taylor. He's seen LSU put it on film, tons of times. Brian Kelly has talked openly about how they love that play. They love to go to it. Does Mike Denbrock have a counter to that play?
Is there a twist you can add to that play?
Is there a twist that you can add to it,
That's
sort of disrupt the defense and, sort of catch them off guard?
Right. This is the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. To subscribe, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. Sign up for our newsletter, too. You get all the headlines straight to your inbox, to your phone, to your desktop. To do that, it's a daily newsletter. To get a hold of that, you sign up at LSU. To sign up for the LSU newsletter, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are brought to you today by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com. By the way, we are here every Monday and Thursday throughout football season, throughout LSU women's basketball season, men's basketball, baseball, all year from start to finish. We will be here on Mondays and Thursdays. You can find us on the Advocate and the NOLA.com YouTube channels. You can watch us live on Mondays and Thursdays. If you happen to not catch us live and you want to catch us a little bit later on, you can do that at any time at the Advocate and the NOLA.com YouTube channels. So we will discuss one of the favorite topics du jour these days, and that, of course, is the Heisman race. Michael Penix 2 weeks ago had a pretty sloppy game, frankly, against Arizona State, a very suspect Arizona State team, if you want to call them that. In that game, he threw for 275 yards, 2 picks. No touchdowns, and he fumbled once. He sort of got right this week. He is now, again, the front runner as far as Vegas is concerned at plus 270 in the Heisman race. J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback in Michigan, is plus 300. Jayden Daniels is plus 450. He is third in he's got the third shortest odds in the Heisman race. Rab, you've out of all of us, you have voted for the Heisman Trophy winner for much longer than any of the rest of us have.
Since before Reed was born.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I know. I know that may make Reed feel very young, but I'm going to guess that makes you feel very old as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Not for nothing, but what was the first? Do you remember the first Heisman race that you voted on?
In 1997.
Oh, so that would have been. Did you vote for Peyton or did you vote for Charles Woodson? You voted for Woodson.
Yes.
Ooh,
and
very good.
That'll probably lead into an answer I have for what you're going to ask.
Well, very good. That's
defensive player.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, look, I voted for Aiden Hutchinson. I guess it was the year before last. Listen, the criteria is very simple. The best player in college football. And I felt that Aiden Hutchinson was the best player in college football that year. So, hey, you're supposed to do as you see fit. So anyhow, what can Jayden Daniels get to front runner status? I think we know what the answer is, but can he do so? And if so, what does he have to do, particularly with respect to this game against Alabama?
I think if you're one of the voters for the Heisman, if you're really paying attention, as you should be, you recognize that he's one of the best players in the country and is playing, the best. He's way up there in passing efficiency and total offense and touchdowns responsible for and passing yards. But the Heisman isn't just about statistics, certainly. Mm-hmm. It's about capturing the imagination of the voter. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that Peyton Manning didn't do compared to what's in 1997.
He never really had a signature moment.
Never really had that moment. What did Joe?
Whereas Charles Woodson had a hell of a game against Michigan State and a hell of a game against Ohio State, and boy, did people remember that. So anyway.
I mean, Charles Woodson had those moments that you go, wow, And Joe Burrow had that moment in the Texas game. 3rd and 19, throws the touchdown pass.
He established himself for my money, he established himself as a candidate with the Texas game.
I think it was the Florida game where he sort of, really got in the mix because that long touchdown to Jamar, that was a big moment.
That was money. That was money. But he also had, as far as I was concerned, I think a lot of the voters probably felt like he had to win at Alabama, and of course he did.
Yes.
So
and I think that locked it up. That run he had, to get the key first down and let him to a touchdown. Anyway, you got to have some moments like that, and you got to beat the good teams. And Alabama is not quite the vintage Alabama team of some of their national championship years. I don't think this team is going to win a national championship, but it's still Alabama that it carries a lot of weight. And it's going to do or die for LSU season, and it's going to make or break for Jayden Daniels' Heisman candidacy. If he goes out and has 400 total yards, and makes some great run, I'm thinking of the play against Missouri, third down on he scored a 35-yard run after getting hurt.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're paying attention now, not everybody's watching that game. Prime time on CBS on Saturday night. That's a different question. And so if he could have a moment like that. I don't know if he becomes the front runner, but he's certainly cemented. Right now, he should be in one of the 4 top vote getters and going to New York. Which is what they do. That's now the protocol for the Heisman. They look at the 4 top vote getters on the Monday after the SEC championship game or the conference championship games, and they invite them for the following Saturday. And he should be that. But you were talking about winning it. He's going to have to win it in Tuscaloosa, in a sense.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Hey, this is not a vintage Alabama team, which is amazing because they've only got 1 loss, and they may very well go win the SEC. I mean, they're still very much in the running. I mean, they're the front runner in the West right now. But I think that to your point, though, Rab, LSU played at Missouri. Well, Missouri's not a brand name, and that was also that game was going on at the same time as Texas OU, so you're gonna most of the casual fans and most of the national audience was probably tuned into that game at Dallas.
Absolutely.
Well, no matter how you slice it, this is still LSU Alabama, and this is going to draw a big number. This is going to draw maybe one of the biggest numbers of the year in terms of TV ratings.
Usually does.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason it's going on prime time. It's a reason that CBS chose this for its one prime time game. So if LSU and by the way, it's in Tuscaloosa too. You go into Tuscaloosa and win a game. Look, you saw what happened. Quinn Ewers was in the running. He was second or third or fourth in terms of the shortest odds for the Heisman Trophy coming out of that game at Bryant-Denny Stadium because he threw for 3 touchdowns and beat Nick Saban by 10 points in Nick Saban's own place. So it's gonna get you all the recognition you could hope for. So and by the way, I'm not surprised. This is what sort of I suspected that people would forget about that sort of off game. You have an off game sometime in October. You got plenty of time to make up for that, and that's exactly what happened.
And then his game against Oregon sort of gets wiped away.
That's correct.
Recency bias. You got a couple bad games, and his Heisman moment. I guess it could have been against Oregon. It didn't happen late enough in the season, I guess.
Right.
It's
right.
sort of.
But if a Heisman voter who is like, I still don't know about Jayden Daniels. If he makes plays with his arm and with his feet, that's got to make some people go, Michael Penix doesn't do that.
Right.
He is pretty much in the pocket. Not that he's a statue, but I mean, he doesn't have.
He's not a runner.
He's not a runner at all.
Michael Penix is 68% completion rate, which is certainly more than good. 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, -9 yards rushing on the season. 2,945 yards passing. J.J. McCarthy, we've talked about this before, but this is a clear case of, hey, who's the best player on what we perceive to be possibly the best team or certainly a title contender. 78% completion rate, that's more than okay. 1,799 yards, 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 168 rushing yards. But as we've said over and over and over again, first of all, Michigan is something of a program in turmoil, given a couple of scandals.
And that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't help. It doesn't. No. I don't know that it'll have an effect on J.J. McCarthy and whether he can win or whether he can't win, but
it shouldn't.
It shouldn't. But the other thing too, though, is that we've said this over and over. Michigan has not played a difficult opponent yet, and will not play a difficult opponent until November 11th when they go to Penn State. Now, he'll have this going for him, which is he will have played a couple of marquee games late in the season when Heisman voters are sort of starting to narrow down their list. He'll play obviously Penn State, and then he'll get Ohio State. I believe they're at home. Are they not? They're playing in the big house, yeah. Well, one way or the other, they'll have Ohio State. Everybody will be watching that game. And then, of course, they'll have the Big Ten championship game should they win that. Jayden Daniels, 73% completion rate, 2,573 yards, 25 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 521 rushing yards. I think a lot of people, it just seems, of course, we're biased because we see Jayden Daniels up close and personal all the time, but it seems as though there's a lot of talk, among the sort of the celebrity national media columnists, college football columnists, that, hey, look, everybody pay attention to what this guy's doing. He can't do anything about LSU's defense having, struggled out of the gate. He can't do anything. He did everything he was supposed to do, certainly in the Ole Miss game, and didn't have a great game against Florida State, but nonetheless, he's putting up the best numbers out of anybody. He's leading the number 1 offense in the nation. And by the way, he has helped Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas emerge as maybe the best 1-2 combo in the nation. So everything is there in front of him. He's going to have every chance to win it, to go and claim it. And let's not forget that Michael Penix, this is either good news or bad news. Michael Penix is going to have some tough games in the Pac-12, which we think is actually probably the best conference, certainly the most entertaining this year. He's going to have some tough games going down the stretch, and including the Pac-12 championship game, which may very well wind up being against Oregon, which had a nice win against Utah this weekend. Anyhow, and by the way, we're probably going to have to keep an eye on Jordan Travis, who's anywhere from 4th to 5th or wherever, somewhere in that list. His numbers aren't anywhere near as good as Jayden Daniels. 65% completion rate, 2,100 yards, 18 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But I do think that should there be a real shakeup and all of a sudden we see Travis and Jayden Daniels sort of at the top of the list, you can't really discount the fact that, well, hey, he beat that guy head to head. So anyway, I just mentioned Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. Even after the open date, Neighbors still leads the nation, 981 receiving yards. Thomas, 15th in the nation, 732 receiving yards. Thomas still leads the nation with 11 touchdowns receiving. I bring all this up to say, well, hey, these two guys, they're very much part of the engine. They're what makes this thing go. But I wanted to pose a question to you guys, and I've got a couple of ideas in my head, but I'm curious to see if you guys have a sort of a favorite. It's distinctly possible that if LSU is to win, it's because Jayden Daniels hooked up with Neighbors and Thomas, and they set the world on fire and they won a game, and that's how they do it. There is something to be said for, hey, maybe there's a wild card. There may be some sort of unsung hero who I hate that term in general, but for lack of a better term, unsung hero who could emerge as the guy that sort of brings LSU home with a victory. If there is to be one, whom would you guys take a stab at and say, Rab?
Well, Kyron Lacy has emerged, lately as, you're like, okay, he's kind of disappeared into the shadows, but he's gotten some more run lately and some catches. I think did he have 2 touchdown catches against Army?
Oh, he had a couple against Auburn.
Okay,
Auburn. It was Auburn. Yeah.
But he's been more a part of the. He's the Terrace Marshall of this receiving corps, right? I mean, he's the guy like. You kind of forget about him, but you do at your peril, and because for one thing, Jayden Daniels has gotten very good at going through his progressions, and not taking off just to run if the first guy is covered up like he did early last season. So I think Kyron Lacy. I don't think Alabama will forget about Mason Taylor either. I don't think they're going to forget about him.
He made his mark last year.
That's right. But I would say Kyron Lacy because he can give you another guy who can take the top off a defensive secondary, and just when you think you get everything covered, oh, there he goes. And so, Kyron Lacy.
Reed?
I think if LSU wins, you might have to go with a player on the defense because if LSU wins, then that means the defense did something right, and just contrasting it to the Ole Miss game. If you had told if he had told LSU fans right after the Ole Miss game, hey, you're going to go to Tuscaloosa and you're going to beat Alabama, you're going to hold that offense to whatever many points, I think they'd be pretty surprised. So player on the defense, the offense might overshadow it, but Harold Perkins, I think, just if he can be disruptive along the line of scrimmage, be disruptive in the flat, tackle Milroe, pressure Milroe, then I think LSU has a real shot at winning.
Incidentally, would you? Listen, in some ways, if you do this, well, then you leave yourself susceptible to something else. Brad, if you were a defensive coordinator, would you consider just saying, okay, Harold Perkins, go get that guy. Go get Jalen Milroe. Go be the spy on him and just whatever you got to do, go get him. Make sure he doesn't beat you. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, it's an intriguing prospect. Not to let him get away and bring you some grief with his running ability, but also as Reed well pointed out, the Alabama's given up a lot of sacks this year, and he's good at sacking people.
Yes.
So if he can get you 3 sacks in the game, I mean, it's a lot, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. I mean, he's wreaked havoc before. That's the whole key for LSU is just thwarting Alabama enough to have enough empty possessions where the offense scores more than Alabama can keep up with. Like I said, if LSU could get into the 40s, Alabama is not doing that.
Not likely to be able to keep up.
Not likely to keep up because they have too many possessions where, they screw up or LSU, does something. So, but Perkins, we've seen him intercept a pass. We can see him, we can see him forcing a fumble or, certainly sacking and putting Alabama in a really long, 3rd and 23 situation, something like that. Yeah, I'd be very tempted to do that.
The flip side of that is that every time Perk is, rushing the quarterback, you either have one fewer defender in coverage or you have an extra defensive back. On the field. Right. And as we've well established, LSU is pretty thin on defensive backs at the moment. So it's going to be a tricky balancing act. I'm always a favor of just letting Harold Perkins be Harold Perkins, and just sort of going after the quarterback. I think he should rush more. I want to see him rush more. But again, it's a balancing act. You can't.
So you're more disruptive instead of extra help coverage.
I think that might be,
Put it to you this way, I'm sort of with Reed in the sense that yes, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. If you send Perkins to go wreak havoc in the backfield, but by the same token, if you were Alabama, if you were Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator, what would you fear more? Would you fear Harold Perkins 15 yards back in coverage, or do you fear him coming off the edge, wreaking havoc, near the line of scrimmage or, somewhere in the backfield? I would much rather have him back 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Exactly.
I not for nothing, but I was going to, we were talking about unsung heroes, and this sounds a little goofy calling somebody who was preseason All-American a potential unsung hero. But I would like to point out that maybe this has the potential for being, okay, Mason Smith, this is your game. This is the game where you're going to make your mark. Mason Smith got it. He's obviously dealing with an injury, coming back from an injury, didn't play at all last year. So I think it's fair to say, looking back at it, that maybe the guy needed to get himself into football shape, and there's nobody's at fault for that. That's just the way it is. You had to sort of play your way back into it. And the addition, and we've said this many times now, the addition of Pete Jenkins seems to have made a big difference. On the defensive line play just in general. But Mason Smith, again, hey, this is going to be on LSU's front seven to sort of handle its business and then some, to do its share and then some against Alabama to sort of help out the suspect secondary, the thin secondary. Mason Smith can get in there and wreak some havoc. Now you're talking about crashing the pocket, getting through the line of scrimmage, dropping Alabama for a loss, getting them behind the chains, doing things that they don't necessarily want to do. Maybe Mason Smith or a Savion Jones or somebody of that nature, even Jordan Jefferson, somebody like that, somebody up front who can really make a big. We saw Braden Swinson, flash at one of the most important times of the game against Missouri, forcing the fumble, the backward fumble that went 30 yards back and forced a 4th and 32 or whatever it was. So put it on one of these guys on a defensive line. Put it on a Mason Smith or a Savion Jones or Braden Swinson or somebody of that nature. And if they can create some havoc, well, now you've made your life a little bit easier, and you need to do whatever you can to make your life just a little bit easier. If you're playing in Bryant-Denny Stadium, trying to get what will be an upset win by the numbers, because LSU, as we say, is a 3.5-point underdog. LSU opened up as a 7-point underdog, as we said. They're a 3.5-point underdog now as we get into it. Rab, any just sort of final 2 cents before we come back on Thursday and get back into this?
I think for LSU, it seems like such a make or break thing. Obviously, within their team, they can't think that. The confidence has to be improving, for LSU since the Ole Miss game. They have to feel a lot better about themselves than they did, leaving Oxford, Mississippi, in late September. They had a very good October overall. That Missouri game certainly could have gone the other way, and they didn't. They pulled it out. They found a way to win, and it's got to be a game like that too. But boy, if there's one thought that comes to mind is thinking back to the Tennessee game against Alabama. Tennessee had led 27 at halftime, but they should have led 24-7. They could have led 28-7.
Yep.
You cannot, and that's one area where LSU is not always the greatest. Is we've seen them kind of thwarted near the goal line a couple of times, especially the Florida State game. They've had to settle for field goals. You don't want to be settling.
Right.
You want to be punching in touchdowns. You want to have that lead. How big was it? They needed just about all of that 33-13 lead in 2019 that had
Yes,
at
they
halftime
did. Yes.
to hold on for that win. So Alabama is not going to let you come in and everybody's like, Texas beat them by 10. It was like the only double-digit loss Nick Saban's ever had at home in his tenure at Alabama. So they're not going to let you just come in there and just run them off the field. You're going to have to take advantage of your opportunities and counter them, with the scoring potential that LSU has. But you got to make it count. And if you get a turnover in their end of the field, you got to get 7. So that's the biggest overriding thought for me. And they know that at LSU. Obviously, that's the plan, to score every time. But you really have to make it count, because Tennessee didn't, much to their
and they paid for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
And I think just big picture, if you zoom out, if LSU wins on Saturday, then they'll have won 3 of the last 5 games against Alabama. I think that's a pretty significant deal, particularly with all the the turmoil, the coaching search, and Ed Orgeron getting fired. So big picture, I think
Gave them all they wanted in
2021,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think
Ed had already been fired, had nothing to lose, and said, "Hey, watch this. Let's blitz the hell out of it."
right, yeah. So I think if you can win 3 of the last 5 games against Alabama, given all the turmoil the program has gone through in the last 2 years, I think that's a huge deal, and I think that's a big positive sign for the program
Alabama,
moving forward.
Again, predates Mr. Darcey, if I may. Alabama had a long stretch where they didn't lose in Baton Rouge, 1969 until 2000, and they said we have a saying in Tuscaloosa: the Tide don't lose in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
And generally they've kind of played better, and LSU's kind of played better. It's been a strange series.
LSU's played better in Birmingham and then Tuscaloosa. Yeah,
it's been kind of a strange series in that regard. And certainly the last 2 games, LSU won in 19, and they could have pulled off a staggering upset in 2021. And I would expect that they're going to be right there in this game as well. It's I don't think they'll be intimidated. I don't think they'll be overly intimidated by going to Tuscaloosa.
One last topic before we get out of here on this Monday morning. We do have Reed here. We're going to lean on his expertise. He'll be covering LSU women's basketball from start to finish. Expectations could not be any higher for this team. You all know sort of the beats. Angel Reese is back. Flaw J's back. Haley Van Lith is coming in. Anissa Morrow's coming in. This is the consensus #1 team in the nation. It will be a tough task to do this, but they are going to attempt to go wire to wire at '1. Reed, just generally speaking, LSU is going to open up on Monday, a week from today, in Las Vegas against Colorado. Just your 2 cents on where they stand as a program, what you're looking forward to most, what may surprise the casual fan who's tuning in just now for the first time, and all that.
I think it'll be a surprise if they don't make the Final Four. I think that's what the expectation should be. Obviously, injuries can happen. Anything can happen along the way. But I think they are, head and shoulders the best team in the country. And just so much talent. Like we saw them scrimmage for the first time against East Texas Baptist last week. East Texas Baptist D3 school,
right?
But just the options, and you just got a brief glimpse of what that five the 5-person lineup could be, with Angel and Flage and Anissa and Haley Van Lith and Michaela Williams, the best, the top freshman in the country. You saw a brief glimpse of that, and you just saw Haley Van Lith hit a couple threes. And it was because, the ball went inside to Angel and the defense sort of converged on Angel, and then Haley was wide open, on the perimeter. So I think just the combo of Angel Reese and Haley Van Lith is just going to be so unstoppable. Haley's going to have so many easy, wide open shots. And if Angel improves, from last year, then I just don't see a team outside of UConn, Iowa, Virginia Tech, maybe that can challenge them. It's just they're going to be dominant. They're going to be they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to be a whole lot of fun to watch and to cover. So I'm excited.
It's going to be an interesting season. There will be no shortage of major headlines coming out of the LSU women's basketball program. We are certain of that, and should be a lot of fun heading into the winter and the spring. But for now, obviously, the issue at hand is the Big Kahuna. LSU at Alabama, 6:45 p.m. Saturday. On CBS, will draw a huge number, obviously, on TV. Everybody in this town and in this state will be tuned in, I'm sure. We will be back on Thursday to give a full preview of LSU Alabama, and until then, if you want to make sure that you want to follow along and read all our writers' great work on this fine football program and everything else, by all means, subscribe to The Advocate. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. Go to our daily go get our daily newsletter. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. You can see this fine program every Monday and Thursday live on our YouTube channel, on our social channels. If you don't catch it live, you can catch it on YouTube, on the Advocates YouTube channels, and on NOLA.com YouTube channels. Let's see, what else do we need to promo, gents? If you can find Rabalais on Twitter at RabalaiSADV, you can.
All I know is this is the day I look forward to every week. This is the podcast and day I do the newsletter. It's early and late with a little Brian Kelly thrown in between.
It's a full day. You can.
I got to put out the garbage on Monday night.
You can follow him. You can follow Reed Darcey at by Reed Darcey, RED. DARCEY on Twitter, or X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. In the meantime, anyway, you can follow us along and stick with us. We will be here all year long and all week long for all things LSU Alabama. For Scott Rabalais, for Reed Darcey, my name's Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.